Hey guys, it's Wack, and I'm here to give my picks for the Overwatch League's 2022 postseason perfect pick'em bracket. Make sure to get your picks in by October 30th for a chance to win $100,000 for the perfect Overwatch League's postseason bracket, or $5,000 for the next best bracket. Now, the first matchup we're going to be looking at is between the Philadelphia Fusion and London Spitfire. And when it comes to the Spitfire, they have always had early exit rounds in the playoffs, so they're definitely going to need Hottie's push-up power to even make it past the first couple of rounds. And when it comes to the Philadelphia Fusion, they always run the tables on push maps like New Queen Street being absolutely godlike. So because of that, I'm going to give it to the Philadelphia Fusion with a 3-2 result. It's going to be a close game. Now, the next matchup is going to be between the Hangzhou Spar and the Shanghai Dragons. Now, when it comes to the Dragons, they already won a championship, but they're wanting to add another one to their trophy case. They got absolute powerhouses in the DPS category of Fleta and Lip, where Lip is already nominated for an MVP. So because of that, they're definitely going to make a deep playoff run. And for the Hangzhou Spar, they just kind of squeaked into the playoffs. They don't really have the fundamentals to make a consistent run like the Shanghai Dragons. So because of that, I'm going to give it an easy 3-1 to the Shanghai Dragons. And we made it to the matchup that involves my team that I'm on, the Florida Mayhem. Now, you might think that I have biasness for my team, and I absolutely do, but when it comes to the Atlanta Reign and when it comes to Kai's Widowmaker, it kills my biasness. When it comes to this season, we are 0-3 against the Atlanta Reign, and it's no doubt due to the fact that the Atlanta Reign has the deepest player pool out of all the entire Western teams. The only thing that I could see changing this narrative of the Atlanta Reign beating us once again is if something like Surmod Jed pulls out the Kriko, which will be made available in this playoff tournament. So because of that, I have the Atlanta Reign beating us 3-2. It will be a close matchup, but that doesn't mean the Florida Mayhem is done for. Next up involves a matchup between the fan favorite Houston Outlaws and the Toronto Defiant. But while Dante and the Outlaws could be fun to root for, versus the Toronto Defiant, that is not a fun matchup for them because they always fall short when it comes to this team. While the Defiant are not known to be a powerhouse by any stretch of the imagination, versus the Outlaws, they always come out on top. So because of that, I'm just barely gonna have the Defiant winning 3-2. Now, the second day of the playoffs, my bracket involves the Fuel versus the Fusion. Now, it would not be a mistake if you were to assume that the Fuel would just win it all. I mean, you got Hanbin being an MVP candidate along with the whole entire roster that could be extremely flexible with any sort of meta that could come their way. I don't think it'd be that wild of a guess to assume that the Philadelphia Fusion will fall flat to the Fuel with a 3-0 matchup. Next up is going to be probably the biggest match out of all the Eastern teams, the Seoul Dynasty versus the Shanghai Dragons. Between the two teams, they have a star-studded roster with the Seoul Dynasty having the veteran power with Prophet running the helm for DPS. But what the Shanghai Dragons also have is playoff experience. So between the two teams, it's probably going to be the closest matchup out of all these teams. However, the Seoul Dynasty is still the #1 team out of the East. So because of that, I'm going to be giving them the 3-2 up between the two teams. But in all reality, it could go to either one of them. Next up, we have the San Francisco Shock versus the Atlanta Reign. Now, at the beginning of the season, the Shock was winning every single game. They could not be stopped. They were breaking records left and right, winning over 20 games. And then they went ice cold. And because they went stagnant recently, I feel like that's going to affect their play during the playoffs. Now, what could help the Atlanta Reign in this matchup is someone like Speedly, who is probably one of the hypest rookies out of all their players. However, I'm still going to give this matchup to the San Francisco Shock with a 3-2 win, but it's still going to be another close game. Next up is going to be the Gladiators versus the Toronto Defiant. Now, when it comes to the Gladiators, they're going to be another fan favorites, not only to root for, but also just to win it all. They've already run 2 out of the 3 tournaments between the Kickoff Clash and the Mid-Season Madness, while the Toronto Defiant have not done anything. I think it's safe to assume that the Gladiators are going to 3-0 the Toronto Defiant. If they don't win this matchup, that'll probably be the biggest upset out of this whole entire tournament. We've made it to the Elimination Round. If you lose this, you go home. And the London Spitfire and the Toronto Defiant, they are very familiar with going home early. This is a rematch from the first round of the Summer Showdown, but really, that's the only thing that I can remember when it comes to these two teams. They're always qualifying for tournaments, but they have nothing to show for it. Last time they met up, Hottie on the Spitfire intimidated the Toronto Defiant with a 1-3 loss, so because of that, I'm going to give them another 1-3 loss. The London Spitfire is going to send the Toronto Defiant packing home. Next up is the Reign and Spark. Now, these two teams are polar opposites when it comes to playing. The Atlanta Reign, they always underpromise and overdeliver whenever they make it into tournaments. And the Spark, they don't really make it that far or have anything noteworthy. I'm going to give the Atlanta Reign the favorable matchup here with an easy 3-1 win. So remember how I said my biasness could play a factor into Mayhem's performance? Well, that's exactly what's going to happen here between the Dragons and the Mayhem. Yeah, sure, the Dragons might have a championship, and yeah, sure, they might have MVP candidates, but you know what the Mayhem have? They have Hydron on the Sojourn. And sometimes that's all you need to make a deep playoff run and to beat a team like the Shanghai Dragons, to have a DPS carry your team to victory. I'm going to give a close matchup with a 3-2 victory going to the Florida Mayhem. Next is a matchup between the Outlaws and the Fusion. If we could just avoid New Queen Street at all costs, I think this could really give the Outlaws a favorable matchup. Honestly, this is such a big question mark of a matchup because this is an East and Western team. They don't play a lot, but because it's unpredictable and because the Outlaws are also unpredictable, I'm going to give the favorable matchup to the Outlaws, giving them a 3-2 victory. Now, if your hype wasn't satisfied between the Dynasty and Dragons matchup, then it should be between the Fuel and the Dynasty, because these are the two top teams from the respected region. Both teams have already won tournaments. Both teams have players that are MVP candidates, and this is truly going to be one of the biggest toss-ups of the powerhouse teams out of the whole entire Overwatch League tournament. But because I have Western biasness, and because I believe that the Fuel is going to have their fans show up in LA to cheer them on, I'm going to give them the 3-2 victory over the Seoul Dynasty, sending them into the losers bracket. Now we made it to round 3 between the Shock and the Gladiators. Now, if we were predicting this matchup early in the season, this would be the hardest to try to see who would come out on top. But the Shock, once again, has just gone cold in this recent meta, where the Gladiators have been flexible throughout the whole entire season, winning 2 tournaments and even beating the San Francisco Shock in the mid-season madness. So if the Junk Queen isn't the favorable tank to play, then I'm going to give the victory to the Gladiators, but with a 3-2 matchup. But once again, it's going to be another close game. Returning to the losers bracket, we have the Atlanta Reign versus the London Spitfire. I'm even surprised to see the London Spitfire right here. The Atlanta Reign have the favorable matchup here. I'm going to give them a 3-0 victory because they have the players to just absolutely dog on the London Spitfire. Here's going to be my favorite matchup if we happen to see this in the playoffs, the Florida Mayhem versus the Houston Outlaws. These are two fan favorite teams with rookies from the Florida Mayhem and veterans from the Houston Outlaws, and it's really going to come down to who's going to have the dog in them. Is someone going to have a pop-off moment not only in-game on tank, but also after another victory? Or is Dante going to be put onto Zarya and play this weird DPS tank hybrid? Who's to know? But I do know that my biasness is going to play another factor here and give the favorable matchup to the Florida Mayhem with a 3-2 victory. Now we made it to the semifinals. This is going to be a matchup that decides who's going to be in the final games for the Overwatch League playoffs. This is going to be between the Fuel and the Gladiators, but one thing to note is that this is going to be played in person in Anaheim, California. The Los Angeles Gladiators is for sure going to get that hometown buff. Not only will the Gladiators get the hometown buff, but they also already have experience to help them out because they already played the Fuel in the Kickoff Clash tournament. So with all that in favor of the Gladiators and underneath the bright lights of the Anaheim Convention Center, I'm going to give the LA Gladiators the victory here. But once again, another close matchup, sending the Dallas Fuel to the losers bracket and sending the LA Gladiators to the finals. Now we made it to round 3 of the losers bracket between the Dynasty and the Reign, and I think this is where the Reign Cinderella story ends. The Dynasty just has so much veteran power to help them make these lower bracket runs, which is going to be very crucial, especially in in-person matchups. While the Atlanta Reign have popped off in tournaments before, I'm still going to give the #1 seeded Eastern team the one up here, giving them a 3-1 matchup. Now we made it to the matchup that I'm truly torn on. Do I let my biasness once again have the Mayhem coming out on top versus the Shock? Or am I met with reality? The Mayhem usually always qualify for tournaments, and so do the Shock, but the Shock actually win out most of their games in the tournament, but they have yet to win an actual tournament. So if Kuriko is meta, and if Sir Majed does pull out the Kuriko, and if the Shock can just choke one last time, I'm gonna give the Mayhem the victory here, and I don't care if biasness is playing into my reasoning as to why they win. So that's why I'm gonna say the Mayhem have a date with Destiny, or should I say Dynasty, and having the San Francisco Shock going back to San Francisco, which is honestly just like a 2-hour drive from LA. It's not gonna be that far, guys. And the date with the Dynasty is gonna be met with some dead flowers, because this is where reality sets in. The Dynasty, they're the #1 seeded Eastern team of the Mayhem. they got rookie players that are gonna be scrappy and are gonna try to come out on top, but ultimately, I gotta give it to the Dynasty. They're gonna 3-0 sweep the Mayhem. Reality doesn't taste so sweet knowing the Florida Mayhem is getting sent home, but at least they made a deep player front, at least in my bracket. And that leads into what I think a lot of people are expecting to be the actual finals in the playoffs, but not me because, you know, the Seoul Dynasty versus the Dallas Fuel, the two top-seeded teams in the Overwatch League, the East versus the West. Who is going to come out on top? Well, I think you know my answer. We will have lots of good matchups up until this point, but the Seoul Dynasty and the Fuel will put on a show for all the fans at home. These two teams have players that truly show why they deserve to be the #1 rated team in their respected region. It's going to be an absolute treat to watch these two teams play in this tournament if it does happen, but in my pick'ems bracket, I'm going to have these two teams playing and having the Dallas Fuel come out on top with a 3-2 matchup, sending the Seoul Dynasty back home to South Korea. And we have finally reached the grand finals between the LA Gladiators and the Dallas Fuel. Maybe it's just because I have Western biasness that I have these two teams ending up in the grand finals, but it's also because I want to see some of the best Overwatch being played. And you definitely get that between the Los Angeles Gladiators and the Dallas Fuel. If this matchup were to happen, it's going to be truly based on what meta is hot right now. Now, up until this point, I have yet to really talk about the meta and it affecting this bracket because the meta is still up in the air as to what's going to be popular. Kuriko is being added. Could we see teams possibly pull out the brand new ninja hero and just run the table and run the playoffs? Or are we going to see a shake up with DPS? Could Sojourner and Genji get replaced with someone like Reaper and possibly see Zarya be the #1 take to see a Grav Reaper ultimate combo? So if we see the Kuriko meta, then I'd give it to Shu and the Gladiators. But on the other hand, if we see Zarya be the #1 take, I'd give it to Hodbin and the Fuel. And if we see a mixture of both of them, then at that point it makes this matchup even hard to guess. But what I will say is the Gladiators not only already had the matchup, at least with this bracket versus the Fuel where they won, but they already beat them in the Kickoff Clash tournament. So because of that, I'm going to be crowning the Grand Finals champion to the Los Angeles Gladiators in a best-of-7 matchup, giving them a convincing 4-2 victory. And that was my perfect pick and bracket, and if you want to make your own bracket, you can click the link in the description of this video. You can have any team win it all, you can have the Gladiators win it all, you can have my team, the Florida Mayhem, or you can have any team that possibly even has the cutest logo win it all. Be sure to get your picks in by October 30th for a chance to win $100,000 for the truly perfect bracket or for $5,000 for the next best bracket. But until then, good luck on your perfect pick and brackets. My name is Wack, and I'll see you at the Overwatch League Grand Finals Tournament.